Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Stutter Chats, and this is your co-host Matthew. As today, we don't have Brandon; he won't be able to make it today, but we have an incredible guest joining us. He's a comedian, he's a storyteller, and someone who's brilliantly turned stuttering into a key part of his act. Aidan Greene. Aidan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. This is the weirdly not the first old stammering podcast I've done on, so I'm always excited. I'm always intrigued to see how long it will go.
Yeah, there's one thing I say a lot often when I do some sort of a speech. I know they gave me 5 minutes, but it might take 15 minutes to finish the speech.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in situations where it's been, I've had to give like a pitch for a film once, and we only had 5 minutes, and they wouldn't budge on it. And I was like, well, other people might get to talk, but I don't know.
Yeah. Usually how we do this show is we usually ask 5 questions to our interviewer, the one that comes in, and just to start it off, I know our followers want to really know how did your journey start as a stutterer, and how did it pursue you to become a comedian?
So, I mean, and I don't know how anyone else, I don't know a lot of other people's experiences, but so it kind of, I would say my life started off, I developed a stammer at age 4, same as most people, but I actually had this quite innocuous stammer where I would only repeat the first sound of a word and I wouldn't really know I was stammering. The only real way I knew I had a stammer was that people kept on telling me, and people were very concerned.
Yeah.
But in my head, it wasn't affecting me at all, and I didn't really see it as a problem until I was 13. It was my first day of my summer holidays from school, and the phone rang, and I just went to pick up the phone and say hello, like I normally did, and I couldn't make any sound whatsoever. Like I thought I'd gone mute or something. Like I just suddenly I had a very like what I would call like a TV friendly stammer. Like
Yeah.
something like other people heard it, I didn't know was there, to something where I just had huge blockages, where I could not get anything out. And the next 5 years after that were not a lot of fun, because it's hard to be like a teenager. I think specifically a teenager with a stammer, because it's when you're at your most self-conscious.
Yeah.
And,
Definitely.
I feel as if it's when other people are at their most kind of, everyone's trying to defend themselves, so they'll often lash out at you because you're different, and it allows them to belong. But I will say, and I think that this kind of was something very lucky in my experience. I was good enough at sport that I did not get really bullied for having a stammer. It was, like I was never fully in the cool kids, but because I had value of a certain kind to them in terms of being good at sport, I didn't ever, like I wasn't like really abused, like there was jokes made and things said, but I wasn't, like it never got very bad for me in that way. I think a lot of it was just the internal shame and the kind of how I made such a big deal out of it. I put myself through mental torture constantly because, just trying to think around ways of, okay, how do I not stammer? How do I not speak? Do I pretend I don't have my homework done because I know I can't read it? All these kind of things, and it affected it so much that I wanted to be an actor when I was a child, and I completely swerved and decided I would become a software engineer because I thought that kind of required the least amount of talking.
Of course.
Yeah, and here's the top tip. I'm a software engineer at the moment. You do a lot of talking.
That sounds funny, but like just going back, I heard I could relate to you and and from the ages 13 when I was in high school, because I also played sports myself in high school, and also like how you said, like I was not part of the cool crew, but also like I was not bullied because I played a part in the school as an athlete, and I think that really helped me during high school with the whole bullying and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But was I know you said you wanted to be an actor, and I did see that you have made a couple of movies already, right? Or you're starting up one?
Yes, we're starting. We're currently
Yeah.
trying to fund a
Mhm.
short film that will shoot in a couple of months. Yeah.
All right. And if anybody's listening, if I'll be putting up the link on my story, we want to support Aiden on his journey to become an actor, something that he grew up wanting to be. Please support him. And next thing, just as you know, stuttering is always a challenge. Everywhere you go, from talking to anybody to at McDonald's, you go somewhere to order food. But as a comedian, you do need to talk a lot. And how did you find that confidence that a lot of us lack because of stutter? How did you find confidence in being up on stage, and how do you embrace it?
Well, I guess this is kind of a twofold answer because first of all, I am at my core an incredibly cocky person.
Love that.
You know, there's a story that my mother loves to tell where as a child one day when I was 6 years old, I just came running in and I grabbed her and I said, Mammy, isn't God amazing? And she was like, sure, why? And I said, because he made me perfect. And I just ran
Mhm.
away. Like I just
Wow.
believed I was perfect. And then because of my stammer, it was never something I have always said as well is when I was a child, I never thought that having a stammer was a bad thing. I was told it was a bad thing and I was shown it was a bad thing. And when I was brought to all these places for like a cure or for like places to help with my stammer, or when people were generally concerned about how I would fare, that's what made me think that stammering is bad. I never personally. So that kind of really tampered with my confidence for a very long time. You know, like I went from, you know, like thinking I was perfect
Yeah.
to, you know, like I was the lead in every school play until I was 12 years old, and then I didn't act again. And so with stand up, it kind of came to me. I was in college, and I was just weirdly because of my stammer, I hadn't allowed myself to really find that many new friends. So I was stuck with this kind of smorgasbord of people I kind of already knew who weren't very nice and would repeatedly say to me that I wasn't funny. And if I would
Mhm.
try to say a joke and I would stammer on it, they would kind of ridicule me a bit. So I think a part of me doing stand-up was just to prove them wrong. And because I always thought I was funny, I always deep down I knew I was funny and I had stories to tell.
Mhm.
But it was them telling me I couldn't, which is a very Irish thing. That there's a great like kind of a you know, a sense of begrudgery in Ireland, where if somebody tells you you can't, you will, you know, you are going to go out with it. It's almost like reverse psychology.
Yeah.
So I just went for it, and I guess what actually I would say is well is a one-on-one conversation to me is scarier than speaking in front of 1,000 people
Wow.
because with a stand-up comedy show, there is a kind of a social contract where the audience, and they don't always, but they're meant to sit in silence and listen and
Mhm.
trust that you are bringing them somewhere. Whereas in a one-on-one conversation, all bets are off. People are wild. People will, you know, assume I've never stammered in my life, so I'm
Mhm.
kind of the expert on not stammering. And they'll be like, well, I'm going to correct, you know, I'm going to offer you advice on your stammer and things like this. Whereas with an audience, I'm the only one who's amplified. In a
Mhm.
way, I always find, you know, I did a show on Friday to 1,200 people, and I
Oh,
was not nervous at all.
congrats
But
on that,
if
man.
I had to go into a restaurant I've never been in and ask for a table, then I will be nervous.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. It's different. It's different. It's because you're in. in your atmosphere, something you're comfortable with, something you've been doing it for years. And imagine if you didn't change that mindset of after you got to college. Imagine like if you let imagine you let people um tell you can't do this, and that's as important as people that stutter. We need to have a good group of people around us as a good support group, and I think that's important in someone's life. And so yeah, so pretty much I appreciate your insight in that. And one question I ask everybody always, and I and it's what's that one word in your life or when you're doing your stand up that you always get stuck in? Mine personally is my name. Always. What is that one word?
I mean, I would say generally my name as well, but I've actually made a point of I always introduce myself at the start of the show because it's the and I don't know how aware you are of do you remember I believe he was a football player, Bo Jackson?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and he always spoke in the third person because he had a stammer. So he would
Oh,
intentionally always say his own name because it was the hardest thing for him to say.
mm-hmm.
So it's like any proper noun will always be the most difficult. But I think I'm kind of at a point where in my day to day, I actually don't have anything. I know my name is the most likely, but I don't have anything specific. I really dread. But when I'm on stage, what happens is often if I stammer on something once, it creates a mental block. And I will always stammer on that going forward. So whenever in a show I try to say my wife, I always stammer on it. And that just developed. I was doing a show and I stammered on it, and eventually I kept stammering on it. But then I will always use that to write a new joke based on what I'm stammering on.
Mm,
So it's almost in a stand-up context, it plays into my favor because the more I stammer on something, the more I figure out what would be a funny thing to say about what I'm stammering on. Like often
yeah.
I'll say like a lot of people are always shocked when they find out that I'm married, and because I stammer on that so much, I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes follow up with maybe it's because it's the first time I've ever finished that sentence, and you guys are the first to know. Like it's just playing with the stammer. So I will say the answer to the question is my name, but it's a thing where because I'm so almost obnoxious about stammering, I'm so comfortable stammering in
Mm-hmm.
front of people that I actually I think I've lost in a lot of contexts is that overthinking of what I'm going to stammer on.
Awesome, yeah. And pretty much you're saying pretty much like every stand up is a different word. It'll be a different word all the time. That's
Yeah.
awesome, man. And but has as you stated, I was gonna ask you this question later. As you stated, like pretty much stud as you're studying during your stand up, yeah, you do use it as a way to tell your jokes, which is awesome. And do you think when you went into comedy, um was that your main goal into comedy? Like I'm gonna use my stutter as a way I do my comedy.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It was that is actually something that developed because what I used to do when I started off was I just mentioned I had a stammer at the top. So if or when I stammered, people wouldn't be shocked
Mm-hmm.
and think I was doing a bit or something. And so I spent, a few years and I didn't really talk about my stammer that much. But then as I progressed, they say write about what you know. And because there was nobody else I knew who was doing stand up who had a stammer, that is a wealth of untouched material in stand-up. It's a unique perspective that the audience haven't ever heard.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, audiences have so much built up ideas of what stammering is. You know, like from what they've seen in movies, from what they just assume. There's all these misconceptions about stammering. So it's really easy for me to play with people's misconceptions and make jokes about what they think. So it kind of just over the years as I, was building out my material and, just kind of, I'd start to write a joke on something, an experience in my past or something. And because I have a stammer, I stammered in that experience and it changed the experience from what it could have been. So I was like, well, I kind of have to write on it. And then the more I started to write about having a stammer, the more I stammered when I was on stage, which was very interesting to me because I think at the start I wasn't talking about it, and it was almost as if I was not pretending I didn't have it because I acknowledged it, but that's not what it was about. But as soon as I started referencing having a stammer, I started to stammer more because it was almost as if I was reminding myself I had one.
Yeah.
Because it's just that there's so much of a mental component around stammering. Like if I was to be conked over the head and wake up with no memory, I would wonder how long it would take me to realize I had a stammer.
Awesome. And you made a name for yourself in Ireland for sure. I definitely seen your stand-ups. If nobody has seen them, go check them out. They're funny. And I am somebody also that, like, I know I do stutter. Someone that stutters. And, like, I'm not, like, why not have fun with it? I'm someone that stutters. Why not have fun with it? And let's just have fun with it. Like, it could be serious at times and it cannot be serious. Why be serious all the time about it? Like, have fun with it. And every time I have jokes with my friend, I always tell him, he didn't hear me. Because I was stuttering. That's the reason why he didn't hear me, because I was stuttering, and they were all cracking up and stuff like that. But my friends, I have no that stutter, so I do stutter less when I do know. And what else, man? And just one more question. Generic question. Have you dealt with any sort of challenges for your stuttering while up and on your stand-ups?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't want to like pretend it's always been easy or so, because I've had both wild ends of the spectrum. I once was doing a show and it was like the semi-final of a big competition. My friend had he'd taken a train to come see me, and I went up, and it was back when I only referenced having a stammer to start, but then all of my material was about other things. So I did my minute-long bit at the start about having a stammer, and then I kept on going with my set, and I realized about 5 minutes in that nobody had laughed at all. And I was like, what? And then finally at the end, I got a few laughs, and I came off stage, and I found out there was some weird things happening in the room, like a woman had taken a bunch of ketamine just before I went on and was being kicked out whilst I was up.
Oh, okay.
But my friend's reaction was, Aidan, that was really weird because you went up there and told us you had a stammer and then didn't stammer at all for 7 minutes. So the audience was just very confused as to why I would say that and then it never be referenced again, but also never stammer. But then I've had the exact opposite. Like I've done a show once where I stammered so much, I told, I believe, 6 jokes in 10 minutes. And a lot of my jokes are quite short. And I kept on stammering on the punchline, so, that the audience would know what the punchline was. But if I start something, I have to finish it. Like I'm not going to ever, just, it's kind of like a point of pride. Especially on stage, I will always finish a word. I might make jokes around it, but that night I was just struggling to say words. and it was a charity fundraiser for a child who had cerebral palsy. And when I came off stage, a man came up to me and he said, "You're very brave for trying." And I was like, wow, people feel more sorry for me than the kid with cerebral palsy right now, which is a real bad look
Definitely,
at a fundraiser. So, it's something where it's not, I'm not in control of when and where I stammer, so it can kind of go sideways. But I think what I've gained in experience over the years has helped me to work with the stammer. So if I'm stammering more, say, than I normally would, I'm not going to panic, and just I'll play around with the crowd. I'll acknowledge all of the tension I'm building up, and often in doing that, I'll like release some tension from me, rather than just 10 minutes of stammering, me not acknowledging the fact that I'm blocking on punchlines and the audience not understanding how they should react. Because often you have to tell, especially, and I'm sure everyone who's a stammer has experiences, and probably you as well, often when you're interacting with somebody who doesn't have experience with people who stammer, you're training them how to
Definitely.
interact with you. Like you have to, so even in my stand-up, I come out aggressively confident because I need the audience to know, no, number one, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. Number two, I'm in control. And number three, I'm the one making these jokes. But sometimes earlier on, I would come out too meek or too self-deprecating, and the audience would feel sorry for me, or they'd feel as because I was making fun out of sometimes, and I try not to ever make fun out of stammering itself. It's the situations around it. But if I was making fun of stammering itself, it made them think it was okay for them to say horrible things. So I think often it's, like we have a job which we don't necessarily want, but we have to teach people how to treat us. And it's an unfortunate, I guess, part of any disabled person's experience is, people have an assumption in their head, or they just don't know how to react. And sometimes you have to hold their hand and show them I'm just a normal person who takes slightly longer to say things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Like you're advocating for yourself and for everybody else that does stutter. And there's one question I didn't write down, just came to my mind right now. Is there? I know stuttering is a small group of people, a small percentage of people, and I have never met somebody before that does was comedian that stutters. Have you ever interacted with somebody who does stutter, or you're just one of one? And
I'm definitely not one of one. There's a stand-up comedian from San Francisco called Nina G. Called it Nina G. And it's around maybe 9 years ago. Me and her were part of an all stammering stand-up comedy show in Dublin.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and she's a great online presence. She's a great advocate. She's very like I would feel slightly removed from the disability advocate spaces, but Nina very much is an advocate, and she's also a good stand-up and just like a very good person as well. So, I have met her and I've worked with her, but something I try to do is not watch other stand-up comedians who stammer, and not because I'm not trying to support them. I am. I just don't want to accidentally ingest their material and think I thought of it. I'm trying to, because like I don't want to be influenced, because like it's easy in comedy for your influences to kind of rub off on you. And when I started off, I was a very big fan of Mike Birbiglia, and I kind of started to talk a bit like Mike Birbiglia, so I had to pare that down and and like find my own voice. But I have and I've interacted with, I just connected on Instagram, and I can't remember his name, with a stammering comedian in England. I was in Montreal for a short period, and there was a woman with a stammer I gigged with there. So, it is there are becoming more, which I think is the great thing. Is, you know, like I've met more and interacted with more stammers, and even just at shows, people with stammers coming up to me, and you know, who are also in the arts. I think it is, you know, I think we are in a, I guess, a more accepting sort of a time. So I think, you know, you are going to get more people with stammers putting themselves out there, which I think is kind of the key. It's just, so I've always said a part of me was always annoyed I never had somebody with a stammer I could relate to or look up to when I was younger. And eventually, even though like I'm not like hugely famous or anything,
Yeah.
occasionally, if you can, you should try become the representation you want to see. Because if I had saw somebody with a stammer doing stand-up comedy when I was 16, that could have really changed my perception on what my life could be. But, you know, back when I was 16, it was just, oh, this is something that Adam Sandler makes fun out of in movies.
Yeah. And Waterboy.
Yeah.
It's a good
And
movie.
also in, I think he
Little
mocked
Nicky, right?
his stammer in in Billy Madison as well.
Oh yeah, he does it. Spit it
Yeah,
out, Junior.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
At
awesome,
least
man.
he gets in trouble in that one. At least it's, you
Yeah,
know,
he
he's the
does. He
bad guy.
does. That's awesome, man. Hey, appreciate all the input you've been putting for us. One last question just to end it off. Um, I do got work to do.
Yeah.
I do have work in the next 30 minutes. But just to finish this off, man, I usually ask everybody. I have one question. I have one question for you. And what's one piece of advice? What's one piece of advice you will give to someone who stutters?
My one piece of advice for somebody who stutters is the best advice that was ever given to me. But at the time, it seemed very harsh and I didn't understand it. So I'm going to have to explain it. But when I was about 16 and I was really, you know, I would say probably mildly depressed at the time because I didn't really, you know, I didn't feel as if I could probably communicate and I didn't see a real, I guess, great future for me. And a friend of mine, he took me aside and he says, nobody cares about your stammer except for you. And at the time, I internalized it and I thought he meant nobody cares about me because of my stammer. But what he actually meant is, even if somebody says something horrible to you about your stammer, first of all, that's coming from a place of defensiveness on their own. But they leave that situation and they will never think about it again. And I know this because for an Edinburgh Fringe show, I contacted all the people who said the worst things about my stammer when I was younger, got them to record them so I could play them in the show, and not a single person remembered it. And in my head, those were the things that rattled around for years. I thought when I enter a room, people are like, oh my God, it's this, you know, annoying, stammering person. But that's this. All of that shit is stuff we're internalizing from how we're treated, and I think that's fair. But you know, you can let your stammer define you as much as you want. I let mine define me a lot. Other people may not want to be defined by it, and that's grand. But nobody cares about it as much as you. And that was a very freeing thought for me because the thoughts that other people were thinking about this thing led me to think it was shameful and bad. And as soon as I kind of accepted that nobody cared, that freed me up to not really care if I stammer or not either.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's just like I usually what I do. I usually tell people when someone tells me not to do this or do that, is like, why can I do it? Whoever's looking at me at that moment, it's not gonna remember me in the next hour. Not gonna remember me in the next 5 minutes. Why not just do it? That's how I see it too, and that's the same perspective that you have. What I got. I love your advice, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, Aiden, and also where can listeners, where can listeners, where can listeners connect with you and see you perform?
So you can find me on Instagram at Greenscreen, Grene. I'm on TikTok, Aidan Greene Comedy. I'm on YouTube, so just search for Aidan Greene. Facebook, if people are in their 50s. I'm on all the platforms. If you would like to donate to the fundraiser for us to make our short film Stutter Bug, which will star me and Screwiest Pip, who's another stammer and an actor. That is just all in the links on my bio and on my website, aidangreenecomedy.com. And just one quick thing, Matthew, thank you for making a stammering podcast. I think that this is incredible, and thank you for using your voice.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So pretty much, just tell you our goal. Our goal is pretty much just to get as much people who stutter into my platform in different type of professions. That's my goal. My goal. I want our younger selves to know there's a YouTube out there. If I want to be a comedian, oh, there's a podcast about it. Oh, I want to be a MMA fighter. Oh, there's a podcast for that. Or it's a hockey player that I interviewed. Oh, I want to be a hockey player. Oh, okay, here's there's an interview about that. I just want to inspire the younger generation. Because when we were young, we didn't know what stuttering was. And I'm sure now it's not being taught in schools at elementary. All the elementary kids do not know what it is. And that's my goal. And try to spread as much awareness as I can.
Nice. Well, I appreciate it. You're being the change that you want to see, which I think is the best thing that you can do.